I would like to call this meeting of the Somerset Berkley Regional School Committee to order at 6:35 p.m. Due notice having been posted. Let the record show that this meeting is being electronically recorded, and if anyone in the audience also wishes to electronically record this meeting, you should notify the committee at this time. Any such recording may be subject to reasonable restrictions imposed by the chair to the extent permitted under the open meeting law. Roll call. Mr. Larrabee? Here. Mrs. Gagliardi? Here. Mr. Ghilarducci? Here. Mrs. Field? Here. Mrs. Rothwell? Here. Mr. Botello? Here. And the chair is present. Also with us this evening, Superintendent of Schools Jeffrey Schoonover, our Director of Special Education, Lisa Martesian, and our Recording Secretary, Robin Baccaro. Mrs. Albanaz may be joining us. I'm not sure. I know she had a parent night at her child's school. So I would ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next scheduled meeting will be on Thursday, October 4th, 2018, at the Somerset Berkley Regional High School, beginning at 7 p.m. There will be a joint meeting with the Somerset School Committee at 6:30. Just take a moment to explain to the committee. As you know, we had originally scheduled a joint meeting for this evening. Mrs. Tara was unavailable this evening. At one point, I thought we might go ahead with the joint meeting anyway, but she asked or requested that we defer the joint meeting to the date of our October 4th meeting. So we're going to schedule that joint meeting at that time. We have 3 or 4 items to discuss with the Somerset School Committee. We'll take them up at that time. The first section of our agenda is student achievement, teaching, and learning. And the first item is status of designation of Somerset Berkley student representative to the school committee. Is this going over?
Student elections are scheduled to take place over the next several weeks. So perhaps by October 4th, we'll have a student representative for the year.
Okay. And next item is superintendent's update.
Okay, thank you. As I typically do at this time of the year, just to give the committee and the public just a quick overview of our student population, as that does change from one year to the next. If you recall, we did have a fairly small senior class this past year compared to our historical numbers. As of today, we have 1,041 students attending Somerset Berkley Regional High School. It's fairly evenly split between the 4 grades. We have 253 freshmen, 251 sophomores, 273 juniors, and 261 seniors. We do have 3 other students in our 18 to 22 program for the total of 1,041. And while the October 1st enrollment is really the critical number, and I'm sure numbers will change a little bit between now and then, but as of today, we have 265 students from Berkley, 706 from Somerset.
265, you said?
265 and 706. And the remaining students are school choice, students of children of faculty members who may live out of state who don't qualify for school choice, students under McKinney-Vento, and other special situations.
Jeff, are you doing a 5-year trend on student enrollment? So how would this look year over year from last year?
This is about 40 students more than last year. We did have, as I said, I believe we had 211 seniors with the 253 incoming freshmen. It is just about 40 more than it was last year. We were hovering right around that 1,000 student mark. But I do have those, and once we have the October 1st enrollment, I will gladly share that with you. Also, what may be of interest, because Somerset Middle School is undergoing a building project, or at least we're in the eligibility phase of that, we do have enrollment projections that the MSBA has made for Somerset students. So I can share that with you too, because it is interesting to see what they forecast to be the 10-year trend going forward, and the dips that they're projecting in our enrollment.
Can you just give me those numbers one more time?
Sure. 253 freshmen, 251 in grade 10, grade 11 is 273, and grade 12 is 261. Then we do have 3 other students who are in the 18 to 22 program. You're welcome. In addition to that, I know I would say the opening of school has been relatively smooth so far. There are always a few students and parents who are upset because their child was not able to get a particular class that they wanted. It usually happens with upperclassmen who are looking to take several AP classes, a 4th year of a language, maybe still in music, and there are usually some choices that need to be made, some difficult choices because they might not all fit in. We do offer virtual high school as much as we can in situations like that. But other than that, I think the topic that we've heard about, and I'm sure you have too, is the seating in the cafeteria at lunches. It seems to be a problem each year. So just to give you an update, so based on the 1,041 students that we have, if they were all here, and that's, I don't think we'll ever have a day where all students are in attendance, but if we did, and they were evenly split up among the 3 lunches, we're looking at nearly 350, 347 or so students per lunch. The seating capacity in our student dining center is 366. So it doesn't give us much wiggle room, and we have 374 seats in the cafeteria, in the student dining center. So the capacity is 366. We actually have 374 physical seats, and if everything was perfectly balanced, it's 347. So it's very difficult to get to stay with those numbers, and at the beginning of the year, some classes, as enrollment changes, it goes a little above the 370 something mark, maybe even hitting 400. The administration has been looking at those numbers and shifting classes from first lunch to third lunch, trying to balance things out. It's something that they're looking at each day, just trying to get those numbers where they should be. I did speak with the deputy chief from the fire department. He came and actually visited yesterday with our building inspector, looking at the capacity in the room to see, is there anything else that we could do? But with more seats than we actually have the fire code capacity for, putting more seats in is not going to solve a problem. It's just going to create another problem. So it's really working with our population and trying to balance it out as best we can. But 366, haven't done the math, 366 times 3, we don't have a lot of wiggle room between our current enrollment and what that maximum enrollment is, unless we were to somehow offer a 4th lunch. So that's where we are. Dr. Brelsford each day is looking at the numbers, making some changes, communicating those with Mr. Lenziski, myself, and it gets better each day. But with weeks like this, when the weather is a little iffy and our seniors don't have the chance to eat outside and now they're in, it does make things even a little bit tighter.
Jeff, if I could, as a parent of 2 high schoolers as well as hearing from my constituents, I'm wondering if there may be also some unintended consequences with the configuration in the cafeteria. So anecdotally, just by way of feedback, this might be something that administration can look at. The way that the seats are configured, and again, this is anecdotally, I would be curious to see if it does hinder a majority of the students in their decisions on where they sit, their comfortableness within the cafeteria, their decision whether to buy lunch or not because of the time it takes to get their seat and then get in line. So I think that there might, now that we've been in the new school and we have the new configuration, it might be a great time to take a look at that, because lunch is such an important part of their development from the social aspect. And the feedback that I've been getting is not even just, is there enough seats in the cafeteria, but is it an environment where they feel comfortable? So as a school committee member, I would be in favor of having administration look at that. I know that we have a new director of social emotional learning. I wonder if there's a social piece to this in any way. There may not be, but I wonder if we could explore that a little further. And again, this is just anecdotally, I'm just bringing this forth from feedback that I've heard from parents and talking to kids at the high school. Is our seating setup hindering that type of communication and sitting? So maybe it's not just a capacity issue, it also might be a configuration issue. And again, if there was a recommendation after administration takes a look at that and surveys the students and surveys the cafeteria supervisors, maybe there might be a recommendation back to us as far as if there might be some type of investment.
And to piggyback on that, when we did our school inspection, the principal did actually say, when you say that we have enough seats, it's almost like we're looking at our children as if they're widgets, and they're not. Because there's this dynamic of this is a group, or this is their friends, or this is who they want to sit with. So on the way the circular table is, what the principal was explaining is that there could be one open seat here, two open seats here, but kids would rather sit on the floor or somewhere else versus taking those seats because they're not comfortable with that group. So to Ms. Field's point, if it makes sense for us to look at what the cost implication would be and if it can be rolled out down the road, if it's more of a longer table that would take up less room, that maybe you can squeeze more people in. But it's not a matter of trying to increase the capacity, it's just more of a flexibility of maybe I can squeeze down and I can sit with my group versus sitting with, I don't want to say strangers, but students that I don't know.
Yeah,
and there's also upperclassmen, lowerclassmen that are all in that cafeteria at the same time. So I believe that is the dynamic that's the elephant in the room that we're not talking about. So you can say we have enough capacity, but that dynamic, diminishes that.
well, I'm happy to talk about it because it's disturbing to me. We've heard in the past that that students, for example, I'm not sure if the tables seat 8 or 10 students.
Most seat 10, there are several that seat 6 in order to accommodate wheelchairs.
And we had heard in the past of situations where six seats are filled at an 8-person table and then other people are not really welcome at the table. As I've mentioned in the past, I rarely hear from teachers, other members of the committee that have children in the schools hear from parents much more often, but I was actually approached last night by a parent who related a situation where her child and her friend were basically driven from a table with an expletive-laced conversation in which they were told in no uncertain terms that they weren't welcome. We pay faculty members to monitor the cafeteria, and from my perspective, it's the responsibility of the administration and the teachers who are monitoring the cafeteria to see to it that there's a welcoming environment there and that students don't feel more comfortable sitting on the floor to eat their lunch than sitting at a table with other students. This is just a single anecdote, although this is something that I was understood occurred for some time. I would acknowledge that the tables are not ideal. I was one of the few subcommittees that I did not serve on that picked out the furniture for the school, and the tables were selected with those individual stools. We would have been much better with bench seating, and I've actually asked on a few occasions for Mr. Campos to look into whether the seats could be the seats on the tables could be reconfigured and bench seating installed on those tables. He got back to me recently and said he did inquire and it's not possible. It would be extremely expensive to replace all those tables. They're relatively new, and I'm sure it would be tens of thousands of dollars to replace tables that are perfectly good. So it's a situation that definitely needs to be addressed, and students need to feel that they're entering a welcoming environment when they go into the student dining center. I understand that it's relatively close numbers to spread it out, and that's difficult from a scheduling perspective, but we should not have students who are being turned away from tables because there's a clique of 4 or 5 students that feel that that's their table and no one else could sit there. It's easy for me to say that, sitting here behind this table, you know, but it could be an issue related to culture that really should be addressed if it in fact is a problem.
Yeah, I would imagine that's an issue that happens at a lot of schools, obviously. Certainly, I think what we've heard today is that if we can look at it definitely from the social emotional climate perspective that you're talking about, and that takes some time, but I think that the staff can do that. I would also suggest that we look at, although there is a cost, if there are some creative ways to address the seating arrangements. It's something we've heard from the day we opened the school. And it just is, all the decisions that had to be made, that one, we're seeing some repercussions from. So I'm not saying go ahead and do it. I think we should put that on the table. And then I think the administration needs to keep looking at the enrollment, because there's capacity, regardless of the way the seats are and the tables are and the climate is, that we have to monitor as we go through. So I think those 3 things we have to look at going forward. But we've heard enough about it since the school is open that we can't just say, let's wait and see if it shakes out. Or I think that it's come to a head where we should probably look at it from all those perspectives.
It'd be interesting to know if somehow, as 3 communities, you know, if there's a way that we could say, is there a need for a table like this in Berkley or at North Elementary for a peanut table or something?
Yeah.
And that maybe that would open up some capacity where maybe there is a table that could be brought over to the high school. You know, it might not be brand new, but if it's functional and it meets both of our needs, and we can share our resources and cut down on our costs, it makes sense to me. I don't know if that's feasible.
We should look into it.
The high school's old tables, the old high school's tables are at Somerset Middle School. We have brought one of those over, you know, and I'm sure, I know Dr. Kamara has jokingly said in the past she'd love to trade tables, one, you know, for the other. So, but those were old tables, I think, back then. But it is something we'll look at it and we'll see what we can do.
Maybe
Maybe
perhaps
this year or next year, it's like bring in another additional longer table, and then you know, slowly weave our way into the budget process of putting those tables on.
Right, and as we bring those tables in, we have to remove the tables that are in there now, because we do actually have, I said, the cafeteria seats 374. That's just counting the round tables. We do have one long blue table in there that we brought over last year, which can sit 24. So really, we have 398 seats in there right now. But the deputy chief told me that, you know, with the capacity of 366 and basically allowing 400 students to be in there, he's recommending that we actually get rid of that table, because it's actually, he says we're blocking an egress. So, you know, there are those situations that we have to work through as well. So if we do add something, we will have to remove several.
Well, I think that the cafeteria monitors should see to it that students are not sitting on the floor to have lunch, and they should direct students to empty seats, and they should make it clear to the people sitting at that table that these students have as much right to be sitting at the table as they do. And I realize that that's an easy thing for me to say sitting here, but if this is a community of students, I don't see any reason why students should be sitting on the floor while chairs remain empty. We have an adequate number of seats that exceed what the fire code permits. And every one of those seats ought to be filled before kids are sitting on the floor. Or what bothers me even more is the windowsills, which are wood and really aren't an appropriate place for kids to be eating their lunch. So,
Over the first 2 weeks of school, I have actually spent 3 days in the cafeteria at lunchtime observing this. I have not seen a single student sitting on a windowsill. I have not seen a single student sitting on the floor in the 9 lunches that I've observed. Has it happened? Perhaps, but I personally, in the 3 days, the random days that I've gone there, I have not seen it happen once. I have seen kids sharing a seat, 2 students sharing one of those round stools, but I have not seen anyone sitting on the floor or the windowsill.
That's because the superintendent.
They don't care about it.
Thank
Right.
you.
anything else to report?
I just want to let you know that next week, the high school is actually, we're hosting 2 different events here during the day. One, we are hosting attorney Patrick Rogers. He is giving police officers and school administrators an update on the juvenile law changes that took place this past summer. It was identified as a much needed legal update for both police departments and administrators. So we're hosting that at the high school on Monday in the Distance Learning Center. And the following day, we're hosting a NEAS training for individuals who will be going out on NEAS visits as the collaborative conference teams, which is that new part of the NEAS visiting process that I had mentioned earlier. So we're hosting that on Tuesday here at the high school also. Which is nice to have other people coming in. We have a nice facility for that training. It also helps us because when we're hosting those, we're also not, we're saving on registration fees, and it's cost effective for us as well. So I just want to let you know that we are having those 2 events here next week.
Okay, thank you. All right. Next item under new business is employee handbook.
If we could table that, Mr. Pierce, you do have a copy of this draft handbook, but that's something that I need to sit down with our union presidents and share that with them and discuss that. It's not something that we've had in the past, so we're not ready for any action or discussion at this time. I'll let you know once I communicate and have that with them.
I actually was going to make a similar request because I did read the handbook, and there are a few editorial changes that I think would be appropriate. So I'd like to sit down with Carolyn Blackmar sometime in the next week or 2 and just go through it. There's nothing of any significant substance, but just a few editorial changes.
Okay.
Okay, next item is discussion on start time of school day. I requested that this item be put on the agenda. It was prompted by some information that Mr. Ghilarducci brought back to us from the Massachusetts Association of School Committees summer meeting. And I read through it when it was first circulated to the committee, and I was really struck by it. I thought the information was interesting and compelling information on efforts in various parts of the state to move the starting point of the school day later in the morning for high school and middle school students. Most schools on Cape Cod are moving to a later start time for high school and middle school students. In a joint statement on later start times for high school students, 12 Middlesex League superintendents issued a letter, and I would just like to read the first paragraph of it. I attached it, here it is. It says, "The purpose of this collaborative statement is not to make a case for later high school start times. The research is clear on this topic, that later start times best support the social and emotional needs of our high school students. The Middlesex League superintendents collectively want to express our clear support for later high school start times. Our intention is to commit to a deadline and to the necessary consensus building required to make a change in long-standing practice. Doing what is right for adolescents will mean changing adult schedules and behaviors. Ultimately, the choice to change will distill down to what communities value most." So, the materials that Mr. Ghilarducci provided from the Association of School Committees state specifically that changing start times is a complex issue. It involves transportation, collective bargaining issues, and parental concerns. But some data that was contained in the information that he provided for change is compelling when the school day is more in sync with the students' circadian rhythms. The data shows significant improvement in academic performance, drop in failing grades, decline in marginal performance, decrease in disciplinary infractions, and decreases in tardiness. Concomitantly, there is evidence that elementary students do better with an earlier starting time. I'm not advocating for immediate change, but for the beginning of a process. I suggest we discuss with the K-8 school committee at our next joint meeting this issue, because obviously it would impact, it could impact the middle school and elementary schools. And I suggest that the superintendent raise the issue with other superintendents, particularly those in districts with which we compete athletically and in other extracurriculars. This is because one of the issues that's often raised about earlier start times is that it would have an impact on scheduling after-school athletic and extracurricular events. Perhaps we can initiate a process where we begin a regional concern to look at this issue. It is important, and pressure will continue to mount for change. I would like to see us as leaders and not as followers on this issue. So I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts about this, having reviewed the material that Mr. Ghilarducci provided, but I found it, obviously, there seems to have been a consensus built on the Cape, and now in the Middlesex League, and there was also something mentioned in the materials about the legislature starting some sort of study group or mandating that DESE look at this issue. So I just wanted to raise this because I thought it was worth the committee being aware of, and hopefully we can begin a conversation.
So I agree that a conversation should start. There is initial research out, as Mr. Pierce said, that supports the benefits to having different start times. This isn't unique to Massachusetts. They've actually done this in the state of New York in different school districts, so this isn't something new. There's models out there. It does seem, going through the materials, that the Monomoy model was at least a 2-year process. Through that, what they did was they created a forum for parents, students, similar to what we did with the Future Search, where there was a gathering of data and information before a recommendation was brought in front of the school board. And I would recommend that we start that specifically because this type of change directly impacts social emotional learning, which is tied to our strategic plan. So given the data that's out there, the resources that we have, I know we have, we've staffed a new position in guidance with our Director of Social Emotional Learning, so I think we have somebody that can help spearhead this type of discussion. I would be in favor of starting the process and dialogue.
And maybe we can invite one of those superintendents to come and speak to us. And bring up what they're doing. Because that was an important topic this summer at the MASC meeting.
Anyone else have any thoughts or comments?
So looking at some of the, the numbers that are in here, although the results are impressive, I gotta wonder, is that solely attributable to the change in start time, or are there other initiatives taking place at the same time? Right, because by changing it 30 to 40 minutes, I can't see how it makes that much of a dramatic change.
Yeah, that's why I would want feedback from administration as they do a review process and make a recommendation.
Okay.
But I think it's worth going through the process of exploring and developing a recommendation. I think we have a team in place now with the skill set that would allow them to do a proper review to develop a recommendation on that. Because I agree with you, there's data in here that we, as school committee members, can't interpret.
Yeah, and if there's, so all this data is related to, well, actually, there's the elementary school. I haven't gone through that, I looked at it quickly, but, if the effect is that good on elementary students as well, right? So it's just a complete flip-flop.
Yeah, and actually, Mike, some schools have actually moved the start time to 9:05 or 9:10, and I realize that's an extreme change, and it might be something that would have to be done on a gradual basis, or may not actually ultimately be achievable. But that's actually, for high school, changes over an hour and a half difference in the start time, not a half hour.
I think the early research is compelling enough to support exploring it. I think where we would have to make a decision based on what administration gives to us is what type of priority is that? Because obviously it would take resources from administration to make a recommendation on this, and depending on what else is on your plate as a priority.
And this was attempted in Boston, with the Boston Public Schools, and it failed, is what, and it wasn't as so much of this type of data, it was the logistics of parents and work time and how that trickle effect, was an economic issue for everyone, and that's where I think, we would have to look at that as well.
Well, I think I commented on that at one of our past meetings. I think it was absurd that the superintendent of schools in Boston, it was a significant factor in his losing his job, that he was advocating for such an obvious change. The criticism was that it wasn't adequately vetted and discussed with parents and perhaps faculty as well. At least from my personal perspective, I would say, and I think that the superintendent of schools in Boston is a highly political position. While the mayor, I don't think sits on the school committee, he's actually obviously pulling the strings as to who's the superintendent. I can assure you, at least from my personal perspective, that the superintendent will not suffer any consequences by responsibly looking into this situation and coming back with reasonable recommendations. It's absurd that the superintendent lost his job in large part, or at least in significant part, because he was advocating for this change. They say he didn't have good community communication skills, but
That wasn't the point of my comment. It was that it was the impact to the families that.
well, as I understand that, and I think the superintendents in Middlesex addressed that in their last sentence when they said, ultimately the choice to change will distill down to what communities value the most. Whether parents want their high school seniors to be at home taking care of the elementary kids after school, or whether they want them to be in the most in the educational environment that's going to give them the greatest chance for success. And so I'll be willing to engage in that conversation at any time.
So two thoughts. First thought is, it's interesting how timely this is. California actually blocked a later school time mandate today. The governor vetoed the bill. because he felt that 8:30 was an inappropriate time to mandate for every high school in California to start. So it's interesting that this conversation is not taking place just here, but it's a national issue. And the second point I just wanted to make real quick, is a lot of this research is based upon circadian rhythms. One of the most important factors, at least in my circadian rhythm, is daylight savings time. And I'm interested if any of this research is impacted by the fact that, you know, circadian rhythms are adjusted for everyone in November when the clocks change. So, you know, if you're talking about your normal sleep patterns and things of that nature, that all gets shifted when the clocks move forward and the clocks move backwards. So I can tell you that in a couple of weeks, I'm going to feel a lot better getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning than I do right now. So I would be interested to know if any of that was factored into this research, or if this is just hardline research that, you know, 6:30, no matter what time of the year, is an appropriate time for 11-year-olds to wake up.
So I think,
Right, but
I think
I
what I'm
think
talking
knowing-
about now is really, is there an appetite to let administration explore this idea? Because obviously, we don't have enough data, we don't have enough information. There would obviously be an input piece. I think that at this point in time, are we as a committee interested in exploring this further with administration as a conversation?
I would be.
I would be.
I mean, it's a long, there's a lot on the table
It's not
already,
gonna happen.
but I think that it's something that does fall in line if the research is as it shows and it helps in social emotional issues, that we could look at it. I think we need to not rush it. I think it makes sense to get community input on it, to look at all sides of it. It's pretty complex when you think about affecting other school districts. That's going to be important to weigh out and figure out how we're going to do it. So right in collaboration, we have 3 districts that would have to collaborate to make this happen the right way.
Berkeley would have to be involved.
Yeah,
Definitely, Berkley would definitely have to be involved. And there could be a financial impact just with the transportation aspect. You know,
yeah, but we don't, there may be creative ways of doing it, and it may end up all, you know,
Yeah,
with some
it could.
significant positives.
Well, that's under the assumption that we still are using the same buses for all 3 levels of transportation. It would be a financial impact to all the districts if we weren't using the same buses.
Right.
If we had to, you know, basically double the fleet, and elementary students and high school students are all going to school at the same time. So it doesn't necessarily have to still be the staggered start for all 3 levels, but anything other than that would be, you know, a financial investment, really.
Well,
Big one.
I raised at this issue at the November meeting of the Association of School Committees last year at a presentation on this issue with the superintendent in Ashland, because I believe that Ashland has implemented a much later start time for high school students. And when I asked him how that impacted on bus transportation and the cost of bus transportation, his response was, "Do you know how many high school students actually ride the bus?" So I'm not sure. I mean, that's another issue that we can look at, is obviously part of all this, as I mentioned, transportation, collective bargaining issues, parental concerns, they're all factors, but we may be more concerned about the bus issue than we really need to be. So that's something that we'll flush out.
And if I could just add, I have talked about this with some of our local superintendents, area superintendents. I also have talked about it with Superintendent Adams in Ashland, because that was a successful implementation. I've also talked to the Barrington, Rhode Island Superintendent, where it was, like Boston, unsuccessful 2 years ago. So just trying to find out what was different in their processes, and I think, as Mrs. Martesian and I were just saying, and as you just pointed out, it's the communication and involving the community and being open right from the get-go and studying it fully. I think it seems to be the critical piece, whether it's successful or not. But I have had a number of conversations with various superintendents about this already.
suggest we defer the approval of monthly invoices if Mrs. Albanaz arrives. We can take that up. Next is school committee meeting schedule. And I looked at that again myself, and I don't know if anyone else did. Robin had circulated a proposed schedule, and I think the dates from January 3rd through May 15th are fine, at least from my perspective. The meeting in June is graduation week, and the music awards and graduation are the next day, June 7th. There's usually a National Honor Society awards night that week, so it is a very busy time. And so, although it would only be 2 weeks from the May 15th meeting, the May 15th meeting will precede the Somerset Town meeting by a few days, and a May 30th meeting would precede the Berkley Town meeting by a few days. And then we could schedule the June meeting on June 20th, which is not right at the end of the month, but close to the end of the month in case we have any year-end considerations. And Robin has checked those, and there are no obvious conflicts on either May 3rd or June 20th. Did I say what I said? May 30th, yes. Does anyone else have any thoughts or suggestions?
We can always adjust.
We can. So I'll entertain a motion to adopt we've already adopted the schedule for through the end of this calendar year. So I would entertain a motion to approve the schedule from January through June of 2019.
Second?
Motion made by Mrs. Gagliardi and seconded by Mrs. Field. Any further discussion? In the absence of further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Unanimous. And that includes the dates of May 30th and June 20th. Next, consider approval of Dartmouth Public Schools to become a member of South Coast Educational Collaborative. Mr. Schoonover?
Sure. The South Coast Educational Collaborative currently consists of Seekonk, Swansea, Somerset, Berkley, Berkley, Taunton, not yet. No. So those, did I say Taunton? Okay. So it currently consists of those districts. We do have a number of students who come from dozens of other districts from all over. But one of the districts where we do have, I think it's about 16 students currently attending, is Dartmouth. They are actually looking to become a member. David Heimbecker, the executive director of South Coast, has put together a potential loss and gain on the back of the sheet that I believe you all have. Currently, non-member districts pay roughly $5,000 more per student for the tuition than member districts do. So by bringing in another district to the collaborative, it would take those 16 or so students, and it would be really a loss of about $80,000. But the potential gain is, well, if they are a member district, that there'll be potentially more students coming because they do use other collaboratives to send their students to. So 2 additional students would certainly balance the loss of revenue that's coming into the collaborative and would be a positive financial gain anyway. Besides that, you can see some of the other pros and cons that David Heimbecker has presented for you. But the motion, Dartmouth voted on this earlier, and I believe Mr. Ghilarducci, has Berkley voted on this already? Do you know if your committee has?
No, we haven't voted
Okay.
yet.
One or two of the member school committees have already voted on this. We've been asked to, the only way a new member can come in is if the member school boards successfully vote them in.
No, I don't want to be petty, but I've looked at this potential loss and potential gain, and I'm mystified by it, to tell you the truth. I mean, I'm not opposed to Dartmouth joining, but we're talking about one additional community joining, and one of the things is on here is small geographical responsibility, and then the other is geographical options and opportunities. I don't know what the heck that means.
Or economic prowess.
Yeah,
Well, that's
and
what I was-
another,
that's what
another
it's
one
about.
says something about political influence. Did I see that? One says intimacy of small board numbers, and the other says board member expertise. I mean, we're talking about adding one person to the board, right?
Yes, you're absolutely right. If I can, regarding the geographical aspect of that, and I knew I was missing a district. Freetown Lakeville is a member district. So for someone coming from Freetown Lakeville, if they are currently sending students out to Seekonk, and Seekonk is the community that hosts the most programs, by having another member district, say Dartmouth, if they were to come in, it would actually, we'd be able to open up programs in Dartmouth, and it would be, programs would be more spread out, so students would spend less time on vans going mostly to the Seekonk area where kids are going now.
So as,
That assumes that Dartmouth is willing to host a program, and there are enough students to have it in 2 locations.
Correct.
so that's the difference. Those member districts have the opportunity to actually have South Coast Collaborative programs within their district, and not just their own students would go to it, but other sending districts would.
Is this just a high school or is it a K?
No, it's
Because
pre-K through 12.
has not had this. We haven't discussed.
Not
it.
yet.
Not yet.
This was one of the issues that we were going to have on our joint agenda, but in discussing it with the superintendent, I thought that this was something that we could, since we're a separate member of the collaborative, we can vote on this.
So, can I ask a question in layman? So what would be the potential negative impact to Somerset Berkley if we vote in Dartmouth to the South Coast Collaborative? Is there one?
I really don't see a negative impact. If we have it, it allows us the option for more programs. It allows, it could potentially bring in additional students into the collaborative, which would work against the need to increase tuition.
Okay.
So I really don't see any really, major negative impacts by bringing Dartmouth in.
Okay.
So
As Mr. Schoonover said, in absolute terms, it has the potential to reduce the revenue from Dartmouth slightly, but that's only in the situation where, because they're a member, they don't send additional students to the collaborative and make up the difference in revenue.
Yeah.
But the alternative to that is they could get aligned with a different collaborative. Then we would lose all that revenue, right?
When was the last time a town or area was added to the South Coast Collaborative?
Taunton was the last one, and that was 5 or 6 years ago, I think.
And-
Besides that, they were all, most of the districts, such as Somerset, came in and
Right.
usually, I think in the early 80s.
And being concerned first and foremost with our students, will they be impacted in any way from a instruction or resource capability by making the decision to have Dartmouth come into the South Coast Collaborative?
I don't see, no.
Okay.
would there be a capacity issue at all? We would need a capacity issue we would need to be concerned about?
No?
So there'd be no need for an additional teacher or anything? There's,
It's not here, because we don't host the South Coast program any longer. So if we were to open up an additional program that's not just being shifted from one school to another, the staffing is all built within that tuition cost. So it's really, that part of it wouldn't be impacted by the extra students.
And we're still making every effort to retain our students in district,
Yeah.
correct?
Yes.
When we can.
Yes.
so it's fair to say it is the recommendation of the administration to move forward on this?
I would recommend this motion, yes.
Just as an aside, once again, at the Mass Association of School Committees meeting several years ago, when Mr. Heinbecker was making a presentation, I raised with him the issue of the collaborative providing special ed transportation, and he said he would look into it, because I know that some other collaboratives in the state do provide transportation, and I can see efficiencies where if the collaborative ran transportation, they could pick students up in Somerset and Swansea, and perhaps even Rehoboth on the way to a program in Seekonk. I'm not aware that, I don't know what might have been done, but I never heard anything about whether that was being considered. So I would just, since you are our board representative, I would like you to just perhaps raise that issue as to whether it's been examined and whether there's any feasibility and whether it would save the respective districts' transportation costs. I know in Rhode Island that special education transportation is centralized, and school districts are obligated to use this statewide system. The transportation is coordinated, as a matter of fact, I believe we have Rhode Island students being transported to the South Coast Collaborative, and they're being transported under this system in Rhode Island, where they pick up a student in one town and they pick up a student in another town. I understand that sometimes there's resistance to that because the children are on the bus a little longer, but we do special ed transportation. While we certainly want to provide the transportation for our special needs students, we need to be thinking about how we can do it most efficiently.
Several of us on the board raised those concerns a few years ago, and South Coast Collaborative during the previous school year did invest in a few vans. So they have started, they have now purchased a few for transportation, looking at it, and then moving forward with the plan.
Okay. So, in that case, will entertain a motion to admit the Dartmouth Public School District as a member of the South Coast Educational Collaborative, and to amend the collaborative agreement to reflect Dartmouth's admission as a member of the collaborative.
So moved.
All right, motion made by Mrs. Field, because she's closer to me.
Yep,
and
that's
seconded by you, Mrs. Gagliardi.
Okay, second?
Okay, any further discussion? In the absence of further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. All right, follow up on summer retreat issues. I'd just like to touch on this briefly. So one of the things that we discussed was the relationship of our night school program to our day school program. Both are under the auspices of the regional school district. And I felt, and I had kind of been the one that was interested in having this on the agenda, but I felt that the discussion got a little off track. It focused it focused on one individual situation, which I never intended would come up in that context, and also some concerned about special education and 504 plans. What I was more concerned about was more from a global perspective as to exactly what the relationship is between the two programs, what the legal existence is, and having answered those questions, then looking from a policy perspective as to whether students within the Somerset Berkley Regional School District should have the opportunity for resources that might be offered in one program and not the other. So, but that was sort of, once we got a handle on exactly what the relationship is between the programs and what the legal existence, I mean, obviously we know the legal existence of the high school, more of exactly the legal existence of our night program, and so that we will be able to flush out whether, from a policy perspective, the students in that program should have access to any of the other programs that might exist in the day program. So that's something that I would like to continue to pursue. I'm not suggesting we discuss it in any length tonight, but just that from my perspective, it's kind of an unresolved issue. The next item is, we talked at some length about a marketing plan, but we really didn't come up with any action points. And so, once again, I'm not looking to discuss that in any detail this evening, but I think we need to refocus on that, and perhaps I'll think more about it and perhaps have some more concrete ideas, and maybe reviewing the minutes of the retreat, how we can try to move forward with that, what the committee's expectations are.
Does it make any sense to refer that to the communications subcommittee?
If they're willing to take it on.
Yeah, we can look at.
So why don't we discuss that? Sure. And obviously, you have a key role in that, because one of the aspects of it is our communication with the Berkley community. So, the maintenance plan, I think, is moving well. Mrs. Field, I think, is going to speak about that, perhaps at this point.
Yes, so the maintenance plan working group, which consists of myself, Rich Fenstermaker, past chair of the building committee, Carlos Campo, and Lindsay Albernaz, have set a meeting for October 3rd. Our agenda is to set priorities, set a timeline, and identify pain points. So there will be a report back to this committee at the October 4th meeting.
Okay. Mrs. Gagliardi and I are working on the community foundation issue, so I think that's going to move along. And the final issue related to how we're addressing the needs of the students in the lower 25% of the class, because not only because the new assessment standards are going to focus particularly on that demographic, but because we have an obligation to all of our students, our high-performing students, our average students, and those students that are struggling. And so, Mr. Botello, I know that's something that you were particularly interested in, and you mentioned to me you had looked at Aspen, and talk about that briefly.
Yeah, so during the retreat, some of the questions I'd asked Mr. Lozinski is how they identify students that were struggling, and he made the comment where they met once a week and discussed among the department heads. And at that point, I asked about the use of data in our student information system, Aspen, and I think at that point he said that there wasn't really, I guess, any good reporting out of that. I did some research and I did find that there's a section of reporting in Aspen that is identified, or it's called at-risk. So it does identify at-risk students. So I would definitely like to see, a little bit more use of that tool, because it is a tool that I believe is part of a canned product that's in the system. And I know, you know, one of the other things that I guess kind of twisted me a little bit was the method in which we identified those bottom 25 was based on the MCAS scores from 2 years prior. I would think if we're looking at the information in Aspen, that we can look at current student, not only their semester grades, but their midterm grades and everything else to identify that. And, you know, when we target the bottom 25, what about the 26th and the 27th percentile, right? And I think you just mentioned, you know, we need to look at everybody. So I think proper use of data that's available is kind of paramount in kind of increasing the achievement standards of everybody in the school. Because I think from a district, I think we do a really good job about taking our students that do achieve pretty well and getting more out of them. I think the bottom piece, we need to give them a little lift up. So identification is the first piece, and then, you know, developing plans and programs to help them, I think is paramount, because, you know, it's great that you have students that do well, because any student that does well, they're okay, they're gonna take care of themselves. I think the students that are struggling, I think we need to focus on them, because those are the ones, like, you know, like that section in Aspen is called, those are the ones that are at risk. So if we can do that, that'd be great. And I'm not sure if it's possible, but Mr. Schoonover, is there a way that we can get like an update at each meeting about any kind of initiatives that are being done in that manner, either, you know, from your staff or the high school principal, vice principals?
I can do something, whether it's every meeting or at least once per month or something, particularly as we're at those mid-quarter points, midterm, and then end of term. Those are the key periods that we need to be looking to see how students are doing.
And you know, obviously when it comes to that kind of that information, you can split it 1,000 different ways, you know, but if we're just looking at how many students are failing, one class, multiple class, are they in level 3 classes, level 2, level 1s, like, you know, any kind of information like that I think is beneficial, because once you identify the problem, then you can start looking at the best way to kind of solve that. So, more updates and I guess momentum in this area would be, I think would be huge for the district.
Can I ask a question? So I remember that conversation at the retreat, and I know that Aspen, we've had Aspen for what, 3 years now?
I think this is our 3rd year.
I think it is, right? So it's great to hear that they have that capability, and I'm just wondering if we've had a person focused on Aspen for 2 years, or not even 2, well, possibly 2
About
years.
2.
So it would be good to make sure that we get the most out of that system and get those reports, not just for our consumption, but as you have those meetings, you know, to identify them, rather than rely, I think the process that was described to us is that typically students who are discussed as being at risk come to the attention of the administration by teachers, by parents, by, you know, looking at some single data points. But if this system, as you said, can generate a lot more analysis of what's going on, and maybe it takes a little bit of time to get that, I agree that we should use it to its fullest.
Yeah, and I think the process that Mr. Lanzinski described to identify students at risk, it wasn't just academic.
Right.
Social, emotional, it was behavior, it was all that. And so not only do we have Aspen that has 3 years of data, we also have all the MCAS data that's readily available.
Right.
Now, I think one of the issues that we have is, do we have the tools to do that analysis outside, not only within Aspen, but outside of Aspen, right? So there are multiple pieces of data that can be reviewed and used to, again, help identify trends, right? And then based on that, you can, you know, build models that help identify students that will be in trouble at some point.
What he described seemed to be, I mean, in an ideal world, exactly what you'd want. You'd want a group of people looking at all sides of a particular student and coming up with a plan to get that student to where they need to be. I listen to that and say, how do they do that? Those meetings must go way longer than our school committee meetings, given that the population that we have at school and the number of kids that possibly could fall into that category, and the amount of analysis and kind of plan development that has to happen for us to try to minimize those kids that fall through the cracks. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and
Well-
in today's day and age, having conversations about kids, that's only capturing a very small percentage.
Yeah.
Those are like the ones that are, I don't want to say the worst of the
Glaring.
worst, but the ones that are, at the most risk.
You know, I don't want to, I guess I should be careful saying something when I'm not fully informed, but my impression is that those meetings that Mr. Lenzinski described are focused more on students with social emotional needs and disciplinary issues, and not necessarily students that are struggling academically. I mean, some of that may come into play, but my concern is not only identifying these students, but then what resources do we have available to address their needs. And one of the issues that I thought that you might have raised, Mr. Vitello, either at the retreat or privately with me, is are we taking adequate steps to inform parents about where their children stand in terms of their achievement, and how parents might work. I mean, should we be looking at having some sort of parent group for parents of students that are struggling academically, failing. You know, when a student, and I'm just speaking now totally hypothetically, but if a student comes in as a freshman and is failing 2 or 3 courses, they're obviously not on a road to success in high school, and we should be trying to involve the parents and determining what the issues are and how we can provide support and how the parents can provide support.
Well, I
Building
think
a
this
team.
is a good brainstorming, and administration can come up with a plan, but I think there's the model, the state came up with a model for attendance. And if a child is out of school so many times that they have to contact the parent and then hopefully have a meeting to try to get that back on track. That's a very similar model that we could possibly adopt with our students that are struggling, that aren't behavioral problems, but are struggling academically, that we could set up some, model that whole thing where we could say, at this point, this is when we're going to notify the parents. The one thing that in the retreat Mr. Lozinski had said was when it comes to parent-teacher conference night, most of the parents that show up are the high-achieving parents or students of, or parents of students that are high-achieving, where they almost wish that those parents that have that struggle, that they would be coming in more capacity. This might be a way of supplementing that and being able to contact them to let them know, hey, I don't know, do you know how to read Aspen? Are you watching what's going on? And what can we do to get them back on track? What resources?
And when you mention Aspen, and that, again, these are just ideas or information points, feedback that we're giving the administration. I agree that sometimes parents don't know until it might be too late, and they might not be coming to the meetings, they might not be checking Aspen. But another thing I would ask if we could check, I thought when we went to those demos for Aspen, that there was the opportunity where you could set a trigger, or not, I shouldn't use the word trigger, but an alert, so that if your child's grade fell below a certain threshold, you would automatically get communication. So I don't know if
That is true.
You can. Parents can set up notifications within Aspen. You can have it so that if every time your child gets a grade less than a 90, you can receive an email. I mean, you can set whatever the number is that you want.
so we
If they're
have to set
average,
that up. Yep.
yes.
Right, yeah, it is a factor that you can put in, you can have it so you can get every grade when it's posted.
Right.
And the one other thing too that was brought up, and this might be down the road in regards to policy, is there was some complaints with some parents that grades weren't put in Aspen on a timely basis. So those data in is only good as data out, right? So if the grades aren't put in on a, and I don't have any idea if that's on a consistent or widespread basis, but identifying to make sure that there's guidelines that grades have to be input at such a time. So when we do a data drop, we know that we are capturing everything.
Well, there is a provision in the collective bargaining agreement that requires that the information be input, I believe, within 14 days.
Yes, it says that teachers must update their grade books within, at least every 2 weeks. It doesn't say that a particular assignment needs to be put in within a 2-week time frame, but just that teachers are updating grades at least within 2-week periods.
Well, we, again, speaking as someone who isn't involved in the day-to-day operation of the place, so it makes it easy for me to say these things, but somebody ought to be looking at whether the information is being inputted, whether those requirements are being enforced, and whether they're potentially having a negative impact on particular groups of students if this information isn't being reported on a timely basis. I would just guess that there's a certain percentage of parents that aren't aware of some of the aspects of Aspen that they could take advantage of, and there are other parents who may not be all that interested. And that's why we have to think about what resources we can provide. Some schools have mentors for individual students through volunteers from the community. Does a student that isn't getting family support need to perhaps have a mentor that could provide some encouragement and tutoring perhaps? So those are all things that I think we should be very concerned about and looking at. Public education's a tough job these days. There's no question about it. The people that are here on a daily basis are working very, very hard, so it's easy for us to say they ought to be doing all these extra things, but we hate to see our students struggling. And I think it would be helpful if we had some data to inform us. So perhaps sometime down the road, obviously it's generalized data and not naming individual students, but knowing within the four classes how students are doing, whether there's any kind of a trend, that kind of information. And perhaps at some point we could also hear from Mrs. Haskell about how we're addressing these issues.
So a couple of quick things on Aspen. So we're 2 weeks in. I've been monitoring all 3 of my children, and for the most part, teachers are good. There's a couple that are less than ideal, but a lot of teachers are very much keeping up with it. When we had back to school night at the middle school, I asked all the teachers what their perspective was on Aspen, and some of them say they enter the grades like when they're due, so there's no like forethought, like I can't see what's assigned next week, right? But again, at least if the information's getting in there in a timely manner, you can understand how the student's doing. And another thing is Aspen's a big database. Everything that goes in is monitored, so with the right tools, you can see if parents are going in and looking. You can see how often teachers are updating, the grades. So again, it's a robust database that if we pull the information out, it could tell us more information than we can imagine.
So do we have someone in the district who's kind of the Aspen specialist?
We do. And I believe I mentioned at the retreat, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed, they basically have structured their school year so that they go from one major report to the next. As soon as one window closes, the next one begins. And our Aspen data person spends almost every minute of her week that she's working on those reports. Certainly whenever we ask for, to run a particular report or to see if we can have Aspen create a new report for us, she gets us the answers immediately. But the reporting part of her job is essentially a full-time position, with maybe a week window here or there where she's not totally entrenched in one of those reporting processes.
Are those reports public information?
Ultimately, they become part of, I suppose they lead to public reports that the state ultimately shares. I don't think everything is, individual student reports, but it's all the teacher data, student data. So some of it gets aggregated and then reported publicly, but a lot of what she is reporting is on individual students and teachers. What she puts in is very, very individualized, and then what the state does with it and how they analyze it, and then they use that to report out in the aggregate, typically.
What's on the DART tool and those kinds of
Correct.
results that are there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we'll continue to follow up on this issue. So that covers what I had in mind on that particular issue. Does anyone else have any thoughts? Okay, discussion on recent legislation regarding teaching civics. So we provided a copy of this new legislation, and I just wanted to discuss it briefly. So let me find my copy. So, as most people have probably heard, the legislature in the waning hours of their session passed legislation regarding civics education. The legislation creates a civics project trust fund, which can receive appropriations from the legislature, but also from other public and private sources. And essentially, there is no guarantee of funding for this civics project trust fund. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. Furthermore, the funding that does go into the civics project trust fund will be focused on underserved communities. So likelihood of a district like ours receiving any significant support for implementation of these issues is probably not that great, but the funds are supposed to be used for professional development of history and social science curriculum, including civics, collaboration with institutions of higher learning and stakeholders, and establishing the student-led civics projects for all 8th graders. Another section provides that the Secretary of State will establish a high school voter challenge program. The superintendents are required to implement voter challenge programs in participating high schools, so eligible students can register or pre-register on the high school campus. An enrolled high school student may apply or be chosen to be a peer nominee. I can't read my own writing here, but the term is essentially a student whose responsibility is to encourage others to register to vote. Actually, it's a voter outreach coordinator, and that's actually supposed to be a student. In reading the legislation, it was unclear to me whether this voter outreach program that the Secretary of State is supposed to establish is a mandatory program or a voluntary program. So we'll have to see how that evolves. The statute in section 2 talks about what is going to be required in all public schools with respect to history and social science, including civics. We're supposed to promote civic service and greater knowledge of civic service, and to prepare students morally and intellectually for the duties of citizenship. Instruction in history and social science academic standards are required, and the curriculum, and I suspect that many of these items are already in our curriculum, but it has to include the history of the United States, the Constitution of the United States, including the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the Commonwealth, local history and government, the function and composition of branches of local, state, and federal government, the roles and responsibilities of a citizen in democracy, and the development of skills to access, analyze, and evaluate written and digital media as it relates to history and civics, community diversity and historic trends in voter registration and civic participation relative to disenfranchised voter populations, and opportunities to identify and debate issues relative to power, economic status, and common good in democracy, and a program related to the flag of the United States, including but not limited to proper etiquette, correct use and display of the flag, the importance of participation in the electoral process. So those are all components that have to be included in the curriculum. Each public high school in 8th grade is going to be required to provide not less than one student-led civics project. Such products must be consistent with the history and social science curriculum frameworks. Projects can be individual, small group, or class-wide, and they're designed to promote reason, making logical arguments, and supporting claims using valid evidence, and demonstrate understanding and connections between federal, state, and local policies. Subject to appropriation, which is always a big issue, schools are, or the state is directed, that's DESE, to establish a civics challenge for 8th grade public school students intended to showcase student-led civics projects that promote and demonstrate an understanding of civic engagement, citizenship, and community service. School committees are expected to designate a student outreach coordinator. This is in addition to the student coordinator for voter registration, for the purpose of ensuring the establishment of a student advisory committee and regulating information and regularly informing the committee of the school committee's agenda. So it would be our obligation to inform this student group, the student advisory committee, of our agenda each time we're going to have a meeting, I assume with the goal of encouraging student input into discussion at our meetings and bringing their ideas to our meetings.
Do they have can they have students on the school advisory board? Are there student, we have a SAP, right?
We have a school council.
No, but I mean, don't we have a school advisory board that we just heard their student improvement plan the other day?
Right, it's officially it's called the school council.
School
But yes,
council.
and then that should have student membership.
That
On
should
that,
have student
parent,
membership.
teacher, community member, student committee.
And so they have until the end of this week, right, to submit a letter of intent to be on that?
I believe it was the end of September.
So this is in addition to, so that they're establishing the state legislature is establishing another just solely student advisory committee.
Well, there is already a statute in place, unbeknownst to many people, including many school committees, because on one occasion when I raised this with the president of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, he said, boy, we ought to get that repealed. because very, very few school districts observe it. I know that Worcester is one school committee that does have a student advisory board, and their student representative comes from that student advisory board. We have been frustrated in any effort to establish a student advisory council here.
I think it's gotta be difficult, because I don't know, kids are already so involved in so many different things. I mean, I'm thrilled that at your insistence, we finally have somebody at this meeting on a regular basis. I'm just wondering if we can make sure that we have active participation on the SAC as a step to getting this group started. Do you know what I mean?
I think maybe it's been suggested that the student council serves as the student advisory committee, but I'm not aware that whether they're aware of that role and whether the student representative on the committee consults with them regularly before coming to our meetings. So
But that person comes
perhaps
from-
once we have a student representative for this year, we can discuss that.
Because that's where the student comes from, right?
It's the
School
president of the
council,
senior
student
class,
council,
yes.
And then there are some deadlines, but they're really actually pretty far out. Academic year 2021-2022 is the deadline for the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education to align history and social science frameworks with the requirements that include these civic requirements. DESE is directed to implement professional development in the 2020-2021 academic year and implement the civics challenge by the 2022-2023 academic year. So I just wanted the committee to be aware of that legislation. I think maybe at some future meeting, Mrs. Haskell could discuss with us how we're going to approach this. I realize the deadlines are out a few years, but perhaps we could implement it sooner. I felt for some time that I would like to see a course, perhaps a one-semester course, a mandatory one-semester course on citizenship, which would embrace all of the various issues that are described in the legislation, aside from perhaps the ones that would traditionally be covered in American history class. I would also like to see a similar kind of limited course on race, gender, and ethnicity, because I think it's something that should be discussed among our students, and greater appreciation of our differences and our similarities really should be discussed, and hopefully lead to better citizenship. So those are the thoughts that I've had for some time, and we'll see how this develops.
Well, if I may, over the summer, the state held a civics institute, which was addressing this new legislation. We sent, each town was able to send 3 people. So we sent Liz Haskell, Alice Ferris, social studies and history content coordinator, as well as Mr. Redfern from the middle school, who's our social studies content coordinator there. So they attended the 2 or 3 day institute, and we are working on, as we have this year, we've established a new freshman requirement for half the year, which is in the opposite semester as the required health class. Our plan is to introduce next year a mandatory class for juniors, which is opposite the junior health class, which focuses on civics and financial literacy. So as that course is being developed, we will certainly share that information with you, the description, the expectations, and so on.
Well, perhaps we could hear from Mrs. Haskell at one of our future meetings about that workshop, and also the one she attended on global STEM. Okay. So next is report on the Bristol County Chamber of Commerce Education Committee. So, I attended the Chamber of Commerce Education Committee meeting last Friday. Mrs. Gagliotti actually chaired the meeting on behalf of Nick Christ of Bay Coast Bank, who is the chair of that committee. And I just wanted to share with you a couple of points that came up at the meeting. Actually, Mrs. Gagliotti is very involved in her through her day job as the vice president of Bay Coast Bank, and we're very fortunate to have her involvement on that committee, because the first item I wanted to mention is that once again this year the Chamber, in conjunction with Bay Coast Bank, is sponsoring the South Coast Education Summit on Social and Emotional Learning here at the Somerset Berkley Regional High School. It's scheduled for Saturday, October 27th from 8 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. We're very fortunate because Bay Coast Bank is an outstanding corporate citizen of our region, and once again is providing a lot of financial support for this. I was going to ask Mrs. Gagliotti to provide a little more detail. Last year I attended, I know Mrs. Field attended, Mr. Larrabee attended, Mrs. Gagliotti was there. I'm not sure if, did you attend, Mr. Gilladucci? And I'm not sure what KA school committee members may have attended, but from my perspective, it was an extremely worthwhile Saturday, and a tremendous amount of information about social and emotional learning. The keynote speaker was fantastic, and maybe you can provide a little more detail, including the keynote speaker for this year.
And Dr. Mitch Ablett, who is an expert in the field of mindfulness. He was actually recommended by last year's speaker, so we're excited to have him. And the focus this year is on mindfulness and how that can help students within the classroom be more effective in dealing with the social and emotional issues that they face. So again, we're really excited. Mr. Schoonover was at a meeting last week, and I think we have 55 different workshops. Well, actually, I should say 34 different workshops. Some will be repeated, so there will be 55 sessions today that people can attend in 3 different slots. Last year, we had about 200 attendees, mostly from the South Coast region. This year, working with the Massachusetts Teachers Association, which we're really pleased to have helping us, they're going to be opening registration next week to teachers across the Commonwealth, so across the state they'll be invited. It's a free summit, and we do give out resources, books and tools that teachers can use in the classroom. This year, it is open to school committee members as well as administrators, and I think at the last chamber meeting we talked about, depending on sign-ups, we would also open it up to other professionals, like in supporting agencies that work with children. So,
What was the time on that again?
it's Saturday, October 27th. It runs from about 8 in the morning until 2:30 in the afternoon. Also, the new commissioner for the state, Jeff Riley, is going to be opening that up as well for us. So we're excited to have it.
It really was an excellent program last year, in such a broad range of breakout sessions. There's a keynote address in the middle of the day, but breakout sessions probably 2 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. I'm not quite sure how that schedule
Yeah,
works.
we have one at 8:45.
And a lunch.
Yep, and then there's lunch. So it's great that the high school can host all these people.
Yes, because it also provides us with an opportunity to showcase our building. So.
Thank you.
So another matter that I'm quite excited about, because if you recall, I had spoken at our last meeting about school safety and how I thought the importance of having students recognize their role in their own safety and security. I received an email, and it was again discussed at the Chamber of Commerce Education meeting. There will be a presentation at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, the Lawrence Lecture Series. The title of the presentation is Student Voice and Policy Change, and it features two students from Parkland High School, David Hogue and Jacqueline Corin. I'm not sure if I said the date, October 17th, 2018, from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Admission is free. It's open to students and parents and high school students as well as college students. Corporate sponsors have generously agreed to provide bus transportation from local high schools. I want to emphasize that attendance is totally voluntary for students, but we're expecting that bus transportation will be made available for any student who is interested in attending. I'm personally extremely excited about this. The moment I saw the email, in fact, before the Education Subcommittee meeting, I had gone online and ordered my ticket. I will be there.
I ordered our tickets, we're going to.
Great. I think this is a great opportunity for our students to hear from other students who've personally experienced this kind of tragedy. I just wanted to make the committee aware. As I said, attendance is totally voluntary on the part of our students. We will simply make the information available that this program is there, and any student who's interested will have the opportunity to either go directly or presumably on bus transportation that will be provided from the high school.
I think what would be helpful, and I can appreciate that there's programs like that, but I think as we start to incorporate these civics programs into the class and students actually have an understanding of participating in something like this and what it is, and feel that, you know, they have that forum to have that discussion in the classroom or have an understanding, we'll be able to have an opportunity. Because I can understand making students aware of this, but really not having a background of how they get involved and what their role is and how that works. So I'm glad that we're incorporating that civics piece into the curriculum for juniors next year so that they can start to understand these types of opportunities and what they mean.
I think the primary focus of the presentation is going to be how students can become involved and make a difference. So hopefully some of our students will be interested, regardless of their perspective on some issues that may relate to this kind of situation. But I'm really looking forward to the presentation. And finally, at the Education Committee meetings over the last several months, there's been discussion because there are the president of BCC and the former president of BCC attend the meetings on a regular basis. There's been discussion about early college and dual enrollment opportunities for high school students. Mr. Schoonover often generally attends these education subcommittee meetings. I say that I think the Somerset Berkley Regional School District is as well represented as any other in the area at these meetings. Superintendent Schoonover was at the meeting on Friday and indicated that he's been meeting with representatives of Bristol Community College about these options for dual enrollment and early enrollment. And I commend him for exploring these opportunities for our students. And hopefully at a future meeting, Mr. Schoonover can report more to us on what the opportunities are in his programs and how his discussions with BCC in particular may lead at some point to some discussion at UMass Dartmouth. I'm not sure, but that's an encouraging prospect too. So I think the committee does great work. A lot of their focus is on elementary education and early childhood education, which is another big focus in the state, but certainly worthwhile for our participation there. So.
If I could ask a question regarding dual enrollment, what is that most appropriate for? Students in what grade?
Typically seniors,
Okay.
because there are two ways of having dual enrollment. If you have enough interest in a single class, BCC does offer the option of sending one of their instructors to the school and have something on site so that students don't have to leave. It does require sometimes some conversations with and discussions with the STA, because it is bringing someone outside the STA to teach classes. It's a common issue with when school districts do that. The other is for students just to take classes there, whether it's during the day, late afternoon, or in the evening, and then whatever class they're taking has to be approved by us, but then they would get their credit both at BCC and it could apply to their graduation requirements here. So typically in a situation like that, they either need to have a parent transport them, or they need to have a license and get themselves over there, Telsbury Street or one of the other campuses. So typically it's upperclassmen.
And so is that part of the typical junior interview process when the juniors meet with guidance, that guidance will recommend, suggest, let them know, or is that too late in the year for that to happen? I guess I'm curious when...
We currently don't have any language that allows for dual enrollment. So that is one of the things that we have to do on our end. It's not in the handbook. It's there's no policy on it. We used to have language several years ago, and I'm not sure why it went away from the student handbook. But it did allow students to take dual enrollment, but it wouldn't count toward any credits here. And that somewhat defeats the purpose. So we want students to have that experience, earn credits here, but also get a head start on their college degree.
Yes.
So that will require either a school committee policy change or just a change in the student handbook to allow that to happen. So I think that's really the first obstacle that we need to overcome. But as Mr. Pierce said, I've had discussions with members from BCC. I've had several discussions with Dr. Douglas about this, the president of BCC. We are exploring an Innovation Pathways grant, and part of that would be a dual enrollment aspect to it. So that would at least get our foot in the door and to try it out to see how it goes in that fashion.
Great.
If I can just add, at those committee meetings, and there's a lot of school districts that are represented in one form or another around the table, and the notion came up that if college affordability is an issue, particularly in the gateway cities of Florida and Bedford, that dual enrollment for early college is a way to get a lot of students who otherwise wouldn't think of that in the doors of these universities, and actually save money for the families. So we're actually conducting a survey of all the area school districts, trying to get information on what types of programs are out there, how is it communicated to families and students, what are the drawbacks, what works, what are the stumbling blocks. And we're hoping over the next few months to kind of gather that information and maybe come up with a template so that this region can really, certainly Somerset Berkley under Mr. Schoonover's direction is going to try to move in that direction. But in various forms, this region can be known for really encouraging college amongst, and in various forms amongst its students to try to increase that educational attainment overall in the region. So that's what we're doing from a business standpoint, trying to get that across all the districts in the area. So.
And it's a segue from what we were talking about with the identification and what are we doing with our lower 20% or 25%. But if we have the higher achieving students, what can we do? And, you know, this dual enrollment can also be an additive for them as well. So
Yeah,
I view it as a win-win, if not even a trifecta win for everyone, yeah.
And the dual enrollment program does not necessarily have to be directed at the highest achieving students either, because I guess, I think Mr. Schoonover mentioned at the chamber meeting that the largest number of our students who are going on to higher education go to BCC. And so the average students can participate in dual enrollment and gain some credits toward an associate's degree. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the highest achieving students. And as a matter of fact, there may be some controversy about whether they'd be better off, you know, here in AP classes than taking, you know, dual enrollment at BCC. But that's something to be worked out and discussed. There was one other item that I wanted to mention that I didn't have on my list, but it just occurred to me. The other thing that the Chamber's been doing, and I kind of direct this to our K-8 representatives, they started with a focus in Fall River middle schools with a program to interest 7th graders who might come from backgrounds that don't encourage college attendance, to familiarize the students with college campus by taking them to UMass Dartmouth in the 7th grade, so that most of the middle school students in Fall River are getting a tour of UMass Dartmouth in the 7th grade, and they've expanded it this year to a youth forum for 8th graders, and all of the 8th graders in Fall River are going to be able to attend this summit, youth summit, and they have an inspirational speaker that they're very excited about, and they're also including New Bedford for the first time in this program. And so during the course of the discussion on this, it probably sort of went beyond my jurisdiction, but I suggested that maybe in the planning stages for next year, they think about having a 3rd session and inviting the schools within the suburban communities. Could send students all perhaps on the same day, because the Fall River system and the New Bedford system are obviously quite large, but the possibility of inviting middle school students from Somerset, Swansea, Westport, Berkley, to participate on a 3rd day or in a 3rd session. Usually particularly the youth summit is a half-a-day program, so it's possible that they could do one program in the morning and one in the afternoon for the suburban students. So it's something that we'll continue to talk with them about. They actually said, well, if we could do it fast enough, they might actually be able to schedule a 3rd session this year, but I think
We're trying.
Are you, actually?
Yes.
Okay.
I've already put Matt Roy in contact with Dr. Kamara, so we're hoping that could happen on October 30th, but we just have to see if it's possible at this point. But
yeah,
we're working on it.
and actually getting other districts too, because I don't know if they'd be able to do it. There would be expense involved in keeping the speaker for an extra session, so they probably wouldn't want to do it unless they had reasonable attendance. But
So that again is pushing at educational attainment. The thought was there are so many kids, particularly in the gateway cities, that have never thought of going to college. That maybe their parents never did, maybe it's not something they've even thought about. So studies show that if you can bring those students in particular onto a college campus and show them what it's like, you start to pique their interest and gain their enthusiasm for school and for studies and for academic achievement. So last year they did that in Fall River and New Bedford. They took every single 7th grade student in the public schools and bused them, and get on the bus kind of campaign, got them to UMass Dartmouth and had them tour the campus, tours led by students who came from those communities, and showed them what a dorm was like, what the dining hall was like, what a robotics lab looks like, what the arts program looks like. And then our fear was, well, these kids are going to go home and get really excited about going to college, but maybe their parents are gonna say, that's not for you. So we wanted to build on that. So this year, working with UMass Dartmouth, they came up with the 8th grade summit that would really focus on maintaining that enthusiasm. And so that's what we're doing at the end of October. And then the next piece that we're working on is how do we get parents engaged to have a conversation about college, explain to them how it might be, provide pathways so that it can be affordable, so that we can keep that momentum going. But it would be great to have this above the interest rates. We focused there because that's where the need was, but I think, as we've heard Mr. Schooler say, I think the need definitely stands out into salaries as well.
I know obviously high school juniors, right, they're looking at colleges and trying to figure it all out, right? Well, I know as freshmen they get introduced to kind of like a career day here, right? Is there anything else, right? Because career day, I'm not sure how long it was, but I know that definitely piqued my son's interest. He thought that was pretty cool. But to go on a college campus, that's a whole different world because you get to see, you know, what life is like, you know, after high school. Not only that, like UMass Dartmouth is a great campus and all that.
Right.
At least that gives them a taste, and that, you know, you can get online, you can look at schools like Mass Maritime or, you know, different art schools, whatever. So I'm not sure if there's any more kind of continuation that into the high school level, because now they're, okay, it's a lot closer to them,
Right.
you know?
We haven't looked at it at the school committee level, at the chamber education level. The thought was that if we don't start them early, like in the 7th grade, it might not have the same impact. So the studies actually show that those kids that did participate last year, we took pre and post surveys, really changed their impressions of what they could do and what they wanted to do in the future. So that's why we started it at the 7th grade. But there may be something we should do at the 9th grade level that kind of builds on it. I think the career day is a great thing to do in 9th grade. So, but you know, if you're talking about Somerset, I think there's always room to look at things like that.
Yeah, just because, you know, even if I can remember back when I was in high school, I had no clue what I wanted to do until like junior year. I'm like, all right, well, I can do something. Let me kind of figure it out. And I'm not quite sure what I picked, but the more exposure earlier on, or at different phases in your, you know, educational experiences is huge.
Well, I know at the middle school with us, we do have a career day and a college day where we do talk about that to try to introduce, but to this level, that would be phenomenal if we could, you know, jump on board and also get that promotion to the neighboring communities and do that, yeah. Because I totally agree with you. I mean, if you get a child on campus and they're talking to almost a peer or someone they can look up to who came from a neighboring town, that speaks volumes.
Once again, this is largely supported by Bay Coast Bank. So again, a great corporate citizen of the area.
You know, if I can just have a plug for a second, since we're on this topic, and I should have said this at the beginning of the meeting, on September 26th, we have our senior college planning night at the high school. And at the night of our next school committee meeting on October 4th is the college fair. Every year, Somerset, Berkley, and Case have a joint college fair where we alternate locations. This year, it's here. It's on Thursday the 4th from 5:30 to 8 in the dining center.
And what time is the college planning night?
That's 6 to 8 on Wednesday the 26th.
And the college, what type of colleges are coming in? How far do we go out?
Yeah, I don't have the list.
Okay.
Yeah, I can find out from our guidance department, and I believe they do send that list out to students at some point to let them know which colleges. It's a good number. It's certainly not like the PC. PC also hosts a major college fair every year, where they have colleges from all over the country there. One like this, it's you know, it's fairly local, but still a good number of them show up.
Is that open to all high school students, or is it just junior senior?
Yep, anyone can go.
Sure. Okay, so the next item we have on the agenda are Somerset and Berkley K-8 updates. So do we have a K-8 update from Somerset?
So I'll give a quick overview for the middle school building committee. So we met recently, and also Mr. Schoonover, Mrs. Albanese, and Mr. Machado went up to meet with the MSBA to review student enrollment projections, which is obviously one of the keys in determining the sizing of the school and all that. So they provided obviously all the projections, and Mr. Schooner will correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like the K to 5. Also, I found a graph I'm looking at here. You think I'd be ready for this? Basically, it showed a significant decline of roughly 10% in the next, what was it, 15 years? It's less than that, 10 years. All right. So the 10-year projection shows roughly 1,600 students, where right now we're at 1,730. Right, so it did show a definite decline. Now, obviously, we know from the high school project that those numbers don't always kind of come true, but it's just a factor that's out there. The other thing that was discussed is making a commitment as to whether we want to look at a 6 to 8 school, or also entertain the possibility of a grade 5 to 8 school. So obviously it makes sense to look at both of those. The cost to do that analysis. Although we don't have any numbers, we imagine it wouldn't be that much of a difference to do that analysis.
And Superintendent Schoonover had brought up that he might share that data with us as well for projections for the high school. The committee did ask questions as to how that data was gathered, what was the data points, and we didn't have a lot of specific information as to how they gathered the data. It was mainly the property fertility rates and
Birth rates, fertility rates, past trends in the number of families or students who enroll in our school system at age 5 who were not born in Somerset, students who then tend to move in from one grade to the next during the course of their education here. So we tend to have a large percentage of our students are not born in Somerset. They tend to move in before they enroll in kindergarten, and then we tend to have a slight increase throughout their K-8 experience. And that's really what the data shows. But as Mr. Botello was saying, again, it's a 10-year projection based on those rates. Somerset at the K-5 enrollment is projected to drop about 150 students over the next 10 years, and the middle school enrollment about 100 students over the next 10 years.
That was actually the wrong call. You correct me.
No, I mean, it would be interesting to look at the data and find out where they come from. I mean, one of the questions that I asked personally was, did they take into consideration the South Coast Rail that's going to be coming down in a few years, and how that could possibly be an impact to our population and students, and we don't believe that it did. So there's a lot of factors that still need to be looked into.
Could have an impact on Berkeley's population too, which would impact on the high school population. I would think South Coast Rail could, well, as long as there wasn't too much resistance in the community to additional home ownership.
We'll make our selectmen a motor in.
There are other things too. I don't know if anyone else here was interviewed by the firm that started the comprehensive plan. I was interviewed. It seems to me that one of the things, one of the real things that needs to be addressed in a comprehensive plan is, I think there's a real need for over 55 housing in our community. People are being forced to move out of the community. If there were over 55, a few more over 55 communities like the one that we have in the north of the town, which I think is doing very well. People are very happy to be living there. It doesn't have any significant impact on schools. It's not offensive in any way that I can imagine to the community. It would open up other housing to young families. So there are some things that might impact on that, but I'm sure that was carefully done, and it's just an issue we need to be concerned about. So, Mr. Giliducci, do you have something to report?
Sure, I have a couple of things. I was there for the opening day to welcome back the staff and the teachers. It was a great time. And the staff preparation day was held on Tuesday, September 4th. And our remarks for the opening of the school year, Ms. Cover and Jennifer Francisco, principal, spoke about growth mindset. That was going to be something they were going to be working on. And one of our teachers in our new class for students on the autism spectrum, this class will be called TLC, or the Learning Center. And we have a new kindergarten teacher and another special education teacher, and we also have a health teacher now at the school. And our maintenance staff continues to do a wonderful job. On particular note, the building maintenance painted several classrooms, which they do every year. They continually bring them up to date. And all the floors were stripped and re-waxed in the school, which was great. An outstanding agenda. 2 books were put together by teachers. We're going to have a new science curriculum program for kindergartners. It's a very comprehensive thing for kindergartners, and they're going to learn a lot about science. And the summer was hosted a special couple events. This was at the K-4 school. Everyone enjoyed the chance to meet the kindergarten families, and they spent the time having lunch together. They hosted a book swap to support the summer reading challenge for all Berkley community students. This event allowed students to come and get a book to take, as well as to donate a book for someone else to enjoy. Our students in K-4 began on Wednesday, the 5th. That day we also hosted an orientation session for kindergarten students and their parents, which included time in the students' classroom as well as a bus ride. My wife and I have the privilege of putting our new adopted granddaughter on the bus every Tuesday and Thursday morning. Our annual curriculum night for parents is being held this evening. This is a wonderful opportunity for the teachers to share information about year-long expectations and encourage all parents to attend. And we want to congratulate our principal, Mrs. Francisco. This is her 17th year being principal. In the middle school, and let me see what we got going on there. While September 4th was our staff first day officially back, most of our teachers were in over the summer for countless hours getting the classrooms student ready and friendly for a start of the new school year coming up. And September 5th was the first day of school at the middle school. Our fall athletic meeting for students and families on Tuesday, September 11th. Families were able to hear from the coaches about their philosophy and goals for the season, along with our overall expectations and hopes for our athletic programs. We held a theater program meeting for students. This is also a very popular item at the school on September 12th. And this year's production is going to be Willy Wonka Jr. They're going to be holding that. And on September 13th, they hosted the annual open house curriculum night along with our health and wellness fair for Berkley Middle School families. We are proud to be holding 2 assemblies on Monday the 17th for grade 7 and 8 students, then our 5th and 6th graders. And this program will fit perfectly with our core values and will add positivity to the climate and culture of our school. And the one other thing I'm getting really excited about, getting Berkley members on the Somerset Berkley Regional High School Improvement Plan. I've talked to the teachers on Welcome Back Day. I gave a copy of this to every school committee member. I've contacted one of our seniors who was a high school teacher, and we got a lot of interest going on. I will make sure we're going to have members on that committee if I have to drag them here. But we will have members on that committee, and I'm putting it on Facebook tomorrow to get some of our high school parents to get involved. We should be contacted to welcome Berkley parents who want to become involved, and then we'll work on some students. So we will load up that committee if it takes forever, but I'll be there. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, actually, another issue that I'd like to address with the superintendent, we could talk about it, is whether a member of the school committee should attend those meetings. Years ago, I attended those school council meetings. I stopped going because I wasn't sure whether it was appropriate to have a school committee member there or not, but I'd like to get a reading on that so that if it is appropriate, perhaps one member of the committee could attend those meetings. So we can discuss that further.
I'll look. I think there's specific language about school committee members and school councils, but I'll find that and I'll send it to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Giliducci, for that. There are just a couple of pure announcements that I'd like to have. I received an email which is headlined Music Town Festival 45 is here. Somerset Music Town Festival Committee and the Somerset Berkley Regional High School Music Department cordially invites you to the Music Town Ball. And this is an invitation to all of us on Thursday, October 11th, 2018 at 6 p.m. at the Venus de Milo. And we'd also be honored to have you join us to take part in the Grand Parade on Saturday, October 20th at 12:30 p.m. You're invited to attend the U.S. Band's Field Show at the Somerset Berkley Regional High School on Saturday, October 20th, beginning at 5 p.m. So it's a full day for those who want to participate, marching in the parade at 12:30 and then attending the field show at 5 p.m. Last year I went to the Music Town Ball and to the field show. For some reason, oh I know, I had to be at a dedication at the Boy Scout camp in Carver during the course of the parade. So, but for the information of everyone in the community, but also to the members of the committee, you're cordially invited to participate. And secondly, I just received a letter from Kathleen Gunning, Somerset Cemetery's location coordinator for Wreaths Across America. On behalf of the Somerset Cemetery's group of Wreaths Across America, I'd like to invite you and your committee to join us as we host for the second year a ceremony to honor Somerset veterans. This year the ceremony will take place on December 15th at noon at the World War II Memorial on County Street and will last approximately 45 minutes. We will go from there to the cemeteries to lay wreaths starting at 1 p.m. And they're always looking for volunteers to participate in the actual wreath laying. I know last year Mr. Schoonover and his kids, I believe, participated in that. I was there for the ceremony. I will ask Robin to circulate this letter because I just received it, but that's not until February 15th, December 15th. So at this point, we have minutes from previous meetings, and first, the open session minutes of August 28th. And Rob and I apologize, I usually bring these to your attention in advance of the meeting, but I noticed on the second page and the first motion, it says a motion to improve rather than approve. But with that slight editorial change, I will entertain a motion.
Can I, and Robin, I apologize, I didn't bring this up as well, but reading through the discussion on the trip that the band took to Pennsylvania, which by the way, I understand they did very well. I was just wondering if we could drill down a little bit more into the conversation specific to that there was a cost to the families of $500, but the Friends of Music were gracious enough to assist if anyone needed financial assistance, and the fact that it was brought up and had the discussion that no student would be held negative and have a negative impact if they could not attend the field trip, or the competition, I should say.
Okay.
So you want to defer approval of these minutes and amend them?
Yes.
Right. Did you get all of that, Robin? Okay, well, we'll,
I can watch it.
Do you send the video to
yeah, maybe if you could send an email with those points.
I
And
can.
then so we'll defer approval of these minutes.
We can always watch the Blue Raider
Studios.
Studios on YouTube.
So that brings up a good point. That's where we should direct community members if they're looking to find archives of our school committee meetings. They're now on Blue Raider YouTube. Is that correct? Is that how we should direct them?
So only the videos from the past few years.
Mhm.
The other ones are Somerset Access has them on
Perfect.
their website.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I'm not sure whether people could hear that. Could you just repeat that?
Sure. So for any community member that's looking to access archived school committee meetings for the past 3 years, they would go to Blue Raider TV. And is there a link on the Somerset Berkley Regional website? Okay.
I believe there is.
Okay, great.
So we'll check on that to be sure that there is. All right, so the next item is approval of executive session minutes of August 28th. I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second?
Motion made by Mrs. Gagliotti and seconded by Mrs. Field. Any further discussion? I did not attend this meeting, so I will abstain from voting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And I abstain, but 6 in the affirmative. And is there any public input? All right, if there is not public input, the agenda indicates that we would consider an executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining. With respect to the employee handbook, that won't be necessary because it isn't ready to be considered. So the remaining item relates to collective bargaining with AFSCME. I've recused myself from those discussions, so I'm going to turn the chair over to Mr. Larrabee. Before we do that, actually, we had deferred discussion on the warrants. I did have a couple of questions on the warrant. I noticed that, these are just observations, that we replaced a mirror in the weight room. Are you aware of that, Mr.?
I was told that a mirror was damaged in the weight room.
Do we know how that occurred?
I don't know.
Okay. And the second thing I just wanted to observe was that we spent almost $10,000 to repair the sidewalk and to fill potholes or sinkholes that occurred Again, I'm disappointed with the performance of the site subcontractor, and we're continuing to incur expenses on an ongoing basis as a result of their work. And I think it's unfortunate, but are there any other questions about the warrants?
I have one question now that you brought that up, because I did see the stairs going down. And then it appears that we're also putting a fence. So I'm assuming that is to inhibit students from continuing to walk down the hill?
The grass hill, correct.
Okay.
That was, of the several things that Mr. Pierce just mentioned, there were really 4 things that we did. One was repairing the walkway leading from the Performing Arts Center to the staff lot. It was a low area, and it would puddle and freeze in the winter, and it was certainly a safety hazard. There was the small sinkhole along the student parking lot near the softball field that was repaired. And there was an elevated area along the south side of the track where the concrete was raised at one of the seams by about an inch or so, and that was, we had someone grind that down and level it off. The one thing that we did that wasn't really a repair was adding those steps last week, and that was really because our students were coming in and not going around. They just kept coming up the grass hill. It was the shortest way to that student entrance, and it was recommended by our insurance company that we add steps and also add a fence there, so that students are forced to take the steps with the railing, just to prevent someone from slipping and falling and getting hurt, and for the district to incur some expenses. So it was really a liability reason why those steps were installed. And the fence will be, I haven't seen if the fence is actually up yet. Is it as of today?
As of last night, it was not.
Okay,
They
but-
just had the posts
Okay.
that were put up. I was just wondering that if there was because that's usually where they would put snow, if that would be an issue.
Mr. Campos expressed a concern about putting the fence there, but the insurer had raised I think for the last 2 years, a liability concern, and was kind of insisting that
That was more.
we put in the stairway, and expecting that even with a stairway, students would just take whatever the shortest walk was to their cars. So the fence was deemed to be, necessary along with the stairs.
There's logic there. I mean, I was waiting for my daughter, and I saw the stairs, which looked nice, by the way, and then I was like, I didn't realize that there was a fence, but then logic does tell one person that it would force to streamline, so the stairs would be utilized, so understood.
Okay. So we're now at the executive session, and I will recuse myself. I'm going to take the warrants.
Are we going to reconvene and open?
Yes, but that's up to Mr. Lara.
Okay.
Yes, we would reconvene in open session just to adjourn.
Okay.
I mean, we're actually not going to reconvene for any business in open session.
So we don't need to reconvene to adjourn, do we?
No, I think, no.
Okay.
I think we go,
Well, we return to open session and then immediately take a motion to adjourn.
Okay. So I'd like to entertain a motion pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with a public body, and the chair so declares. We'll take a motion at the end of that to come back to open session just to,
I don't think
I don't
we
think
need to do
we-
that.
no,
We've
because
never
we don't
done
want
that
them to
before,
have to
because
stay.
we would, others,
okay.
we could dismiss others.
So at the will of the committee, we'll adjourn the public session at this point and have the executive session closed at the end.
I
Okay.
agree.
Yeah.
So do I have a motion to that effect?
so move.
Second?
And by roll call, Mr. Gillucci,
Aye.
Mrs. Field,
Aye.
Mrs. Gagliardi,
Aye.
Mrs. Rothwell,
Aye.
Mr. Vitello, and the chair votes aye. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening.
Thank you.